Thank you. One of the questions was about what about the future of the EU? You know, instead of having to keep defending what the EU has done till now, then what is our vision of what Europe could do in the future? And I do think there's lots that can be said about that. We could be talking about what we call a Green New Deal right across the EU. In other words, an amazing way of investing in green technology, green energy, energy efficiency, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, getting fuel poverty down, tackling climate change at the same time. You know, doing that across Europe will be a fantastically positive thing to do. We could be talking about a minimum wage in each European country. I don't mean a common EU minimum wage, we're way off that. But we could be lobbying for that. We could be encouraging, we could be supporting, we could say why this matters, so that you would begin to tackle that huge disparity that there is between the different countries of the EU. When it comes to the refugee crisis, actually not many people know that the Commission actually did come up with a pretty progressive plan whereby we could deal with at least some of the big challenge that the greatest movement of people since the Second World War is presenting. In other words, the Commission came up with a plan whereby you could think about how different countries in the EU could step up to their responsibility based on their GDP, based on their population density, the numbers of jobs, the number of refugees they'd already taken in. You know, there is lots that the EU could do in terms of being a real leader in environmental terms, in social terms, in human rights terms. But it means that we need to be freed up from having this argument before we can play our role in really making that happen. The gentleman at the front here asked us a question at the very beginning, and I don't want us to not answer it, because then that will simply reinforce the burden of his question, which is why are we not talking about immigration in a different way? And you didn't say it explicitly, but I suspect what you meant by that is, why don't we start saying that immigration is a bad thing, and then that
No, I don't mean that. I mean, why don't you have some sort of things that stand up to what Nigel Farage says?
Well,
it doesn't have to be completely negative, but it has to sound as though you mean it and you would do it.
Well, I hope I did mean it when I was talking about actually saying that freedom of movement, in other words, within the 28 member states, is something that I think is culturally positive. It is something that is economically positive. I think we could make more of that latter point by ring-fencing some of that money and making sure that we're investing it in places that are under pressure. But that really relates, the reason I wanted to come back to that was partly to reinforce what Nick said about the numbers of people that are already from the UK living in other countries and what are the implications for them if we suddenly begin to pull back the drawbridge. But also about, again, what kind of country are we? And I want to come back with my final point about the question about, well, what is the emotional argument here? I really liked Nick's emotional argument, and I would have nicked that one if he hadn't got there first. In other words, this idea of safety in numbers. And the other one, I haven't got quite the right words to put it in yet, but it is something about saying, I really hate the phrase EU migrant. I think it's a horrible word. You know, EU migrants are actually our friends, our doctors, the people in our local shop that we know, the people we see in the street. EU migrants are actually some of the people that enrich our culture, our music, you know, the people that are around us, our wives, our mothers-in-laws, or whoever. You know, these are our friends and neighbours and our community. And the more that we can get that message across, that we are talking about people who we know and love, not just some kind of abstract concept that is added up in tens of thousands, then perhaps we'll get people to think about the EU in the way that I think is more helpful.